And good afternoon to everyone joining our webinar today. We are joined by Claire Ward of HR Hub. Hi, Claire.
Hello, Mita.
Really good to have you back. Thanks for joining us.
Not at all. Thank you. Thank you for asking me. It's great.
Well, we definitely need your expertise. Today's masterclass, the main masterclass, is all about reawakening your workforce. We were just doing a little touch base before, actually, weren't we, about the way it feels that organizations are working out there. And a morning to Maureen. Thank you for saying hi. We do have a chat room to the right-hand side, actually, we're just setting the scene while everyone jumps on. So this is a Q&A session. Claire, our expert of the day, has lots of knowledge and information, but the more questions you ask, the more interactive we can make it, and hopefully the more relevant and therefore effective and useful to you. So if you do have questions, please post them in the chat box and we will do everything to make sure we get answers to you. The session should be about 30 to 40 minutes, depending on the Q&As and also content, but we also know everyone's time is super precious, so we won't go beyond 40 minutes. And Claire, what are your thoughts? What's the feel? What's going on out there at the moment?
So I feel there's a bit of a change in the air at the moment. So there's kind of, still a lot of nerves out there from businesses as well as just kind of generally. But there's a lot of positivity that I'm seeing for many of our clients in terms of, they're bringing people back from furloughing. They are kind of planning their next 6 months, and there's a lot of change on that front. So I don't think people are remotely secure or knowing exactly what's going on, but I do feel there's kind of cautious optimism, out there.
Cautious optimism. That word just sort of resonated with me. I think you're right. That's the vibe we're getting. But we're kind of getting mixed messages from government as well, aren't we? Because Boris and Rishi want to kickstart the economy. They want everyone to go back to work and back to their offices. Because people have been working from home, even though a lot of people have been furloughed. And Matt Hancock saying, whatever happens, agile working and flexible working should be something for the future. And I think actually, you look at Primark saying no to Rishi Sunak's furlough grant. Companies know and organizations know what they need for their world, don't they?
Yeah, I think they do. And I think, obviously this is, changed things for people in the way they're thinking. The majority of people, I think, have changed. There's always going to be a small minority who believe that, a fixed way is the right way for them. Who am I to challenge that? But today's session is actually, I think, really geared towards the majority of clients that I find, but also the people that I interact with, who understand, agility at its heart is about change, and who understand that actually they need to be a little bit more agile, they need to be a bit more flexible. And I do think we are slightly getting mixed messages, but actually I see the sort of gung-ho nature of what we're being told not necessarily reflected in the majority of people. I don't see people rushing out to do anything at the moment. I think there's a bit of a reticence, and I think maybe September people are starting to plan a little bit more, but most people I know are just kind of, okay, not hunkered down, but just thinking, do you know what, we'll just stick with what we're doing, should I say, for the time being, where it can work, where it really can't work. And there are a few businesses which obviously struggle slightly to be a little bit more flexible, but I think aside from that, people are just thinking, okay, we'll just how can we adapt,
even commercially, if flexibility and agility creates loyalty and therefore longevity in your employees. And we all know the cost of hiring. We're in the attraction space as well as the development, and the cost of hiring, the cost of replacing, it's huge. So whatever an organization can do to retain their people and get that loyalty in return, it's only going to enhance their bottom line and the return they get. So there's a lot to be taken from today's session, and I'm just going to cover off the 3 areas that we said we talk about. So the first one is the benefits, which is a little bit of what we're touching on now, the benefits of an agile workforce. We're talking about how we manage an agile workforce and the fact that actually managers do need to refresh, refine and upskill in how to coach and manage and train this workforce that may be fully remote, or most likely, as we said, September onwards, have a 2-location working structure.
Yeah.
And then you kindly said that your third area of consideration is going to be about the practicalities and what it means for the people who are actually agile, and how we can incorporate that into a winning business world.
Yeah. Yep, that sounds about right. Absolutely. With some other little bits along the way. So I'll talk about some of my experiences and what I found. So if I start this, let's see. Yeah. Can you all see that? Mita, can you see that?
I can see that. So hopefully everyone else can as well. If you've got any problems, give us your comments on the right-hand side there, guys. And remember, any questions, we're here to answer them along the way.
Cool. So I think, Agile is originally, it's a software development term. So I think it's definitely, it's made its way into mainstream business. And I want to talk a little bit about the history of Agile, because it's really quite relevant to actually the business, implications and the business practicalities of it. But it is, as you say, fundamentally, it's a software development term. It has come about over a period. This is Stephen Hawking. A little. I do like my quotes. So he was not actually talking. The late great theoretical physicist. He was not actually talking about Agile. Yeah. You mentioned this, but at its heart, Agile is about adapting to change, and there's a lot of reasons why people do go Agile, and there's a lot of benefits to big employers. Apple and Philips, ING Bank were some of the earlier proponents of initially maybe an Agile methodology in terms of their technical teams, and then fully adopting that in other areas of the business. So the term Agile was actually coined in 2001. So it was a group of software developers in Utah, I believe, who created what's known as the Agile Manifesto. Now, I'm definitely old enough to have been working in 2001, and within my background is actually in software development in terms of providing HR. Can't code myself or very badly, but I was working within teams who were delivering quite big projects, so technical and infrastructure projects. Right. So I was very familiar with the fact that actually the common theme within big projects at the time was was more static waterfall methodology, which was, and I can see already now, on reflection, some of the reasons why this Agile Manifesto came to hold. A little bit of insight, for example, is I'm going to talk about software development here, or project plans, but the same you can be applied to any other kind of purpose or goal that you're actually focused on. If it's developing, in HR, if it's developing, a leadership program, or focused on a new, recruitment drive, or altering the culture. Either way, it can still be applied. Okay. What I saw was in these kind of big organisations. One organisation I was in, they spent 12 months. And God knows how much money on delivering the first part of a project that had literally, I think, half the business involved in it. And I remember very clearly that at one stage we were all invited along to this big boardroom, and then we were kind of presented with this finished product, which was going to really help the business turn it around. It was a business which had call centers, was linked with financial services. So hundreds and hundreds of people were feeding into this software product, and it wasn't fit for purpose. And all of this money had been spent on it, and there was a sort of kind of collective silence at the end of this initial presentation about, oh my gosh, something's been delivered, but this is not. Yeah.
Finger is not on the pulse.
Exactly. And I can imagine that this must have been happening, in tons of other areas. And we've probably all had experiences of when we've got it wrong. So I think that was, that's some of the background to actually why these developers felt, okay, let's be clear over what we feel the principles are. Now, I haven't written up the 4 values, the 4 principles and 12 values. I kind of translated them into general terminology, but all you need to do is Google the Agile Manifesto and you can see it. But the fundamental principles was that work needs to be about continuous improvement and reflection, and not this start at a point and we don't therefore involve the customer, which for many of us will be internal customers, until right at the end. Get them up front, get them involved very early. What actually tends to happen is people have what's known as sprints in Agile terminology. So you'll have a time frame that basically says I'm going to deliver something in in 2 weeks. And at the end of that, we'll then talk to the customer about what we've done. We'll get their feedback. They can, they can tell us about any changes, because that's the other thing, right to the bottom point is welcoming changing requirements. If you're in a massive, if you're working on a massive project, a massive change program within your business, then those requirements are going to change over time, particularly if you're working on it for like 6 to 9 months. I mean, most businesses, exactly. So having them involved, means that actually you don't do unnecessary work. It's also about breaking things down. So again, a traditional sort of project management and software development methodology would have been this kind of cascading system where you draw up the goals. Everyone has a specific bit. There, Gantt charts are a big part of it. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I do love a Gantt chart, particularly as we've been talking about home renovations. Gantt chart's very useful with that. But this isn't about having no process whatsoever. It's about actually making sure that you break each of the tasks down so that people understand what they can do and what they have ownership over.
I think also, just before we move forward, I think what's great about applying this mindset and this approach, what we're dealing with at the moment, is that everyone involved can understand that this is not a long line that's defined, and it's almost a dotted wavy line that's constantly evolving and changing, and hopefully we can be comfortable in the discomfort of the unknown and know that we have a system that is structured to get the best outcomes. And that's reassuring, isn't it, for people in an organization as well?
Absolutely. And Agile is, again, it's a big proponent of the organization being an evolving and living organism. And you can probably take that a little bit too far, but I like the principles, because I think it is, and it is not just around the processes and your structure, but it's about your mindset as well. So there's acknowledging the kind of self-organization of teams, and again that invokes a different leadership style as well, in terms of supporting people, and not just a very directive leadership style. So it's really no wonder that it made its way, as a sort of principle, into other areas of business, and more mainstream business. I think it's a very big buzzword now in terms of out there. And you only have to Google to find an abundance of articles about agile leadership and agile organizations. And these 3 C's, these came about through, it's the Agile Consortium, which are sort of leadership proponents of Agile, and they talk about communication, commitment, and collaboration. I'm all for easily rememberable snippets. So and it's very clear how it's kind of evolved into this in terms of communication. It's very iterative. So in keeping with an evolving project or structure or need for the business. So let's think of it as business drivers, not a project, but whatever the need is, this iterative communication means it's not just top down. It means constant feedback from both the customer, and the team as well. So everybody is encouraged to get on board, which improves, problem solving as well.
Plays, it empowers them, doesn't it? Everyone knows what good looks like. Everyone knows what is expected, and not just words, but behaviours that will create those outcomes.
Yeah, exactly. And rather than being, directive in the, this is what we need to do, and this is the only way that we're going to do it. If you, meet all of these time boxes and do all of these things, it encourages them to be able to actually, if we've all got the shared purpose, we all know what we're trying to do, be it make the best, make the best culture, make the best product, improve our services to our customers. If you can get on board with that and get the team inspired by that shared vision, then actually you don't need the, kind of beating over a stick with timeframes, because people have that commitment kind of naturally. It comes. So.
Yeah. And I don't think that's ever been as prevalent as it is now, actually, this real community and unity from organizations, that we're all in this together. We know we need to unlock and come out of this, in a winning way in a very difficult market. So I think everyone's ready to put their collective mindsets together and get the best outcomes. And I think, again, any member of an organization with an agile environment will feel empowered and grateful that they actually have a say, and their expertise matters whatever level they're at in the organization.
Yeah, I completely agree. And also, I think actually you mentioned a really good word, which is not on there, but is also a C word, is the community. So I think, you know, it does build a community around this shared vision for whatever it is that you're doing. And, you know, the great things, what we know about communities and partnerships that work are that there is something in it for everyone. So it's not just that you're serving, you know, somebody or delivering something, you feel part of it, and you feel that, again, that sense of ownership. So yeah, so I think it's, you know, definitely found its way into overall business. I think I mean, we've even have an agile, you know, HR movement that adopts the same principles, you know, which is, you know, quite highly kind of published now. And the reason is not just because it is this buzzword, but there are also, you know, there are benefits to being this adaptive, this customer centric. You know, as with many things, they boil down to time, cost, and quality. In terms of, you know, you're going to ultimately make cost savings for yourself and for the customer if you don't, you know, have to keep redoing stuff again. You know, when I look and I think about, you know, big projects that even I've been involved in, and I've actually reflected and thought, God, I could have done that so differently if I'd have actually gone to the customer and talked about that early. It would have saved me, you know, maybe I didn't want to do it because I didn't have enough stuff to go to the customer with at that stage, which is again the wrong way of looking at it. An agile proponent in any sort of business would say that actually, again, if you go to the customer with what you've got so far and you can talk about it, your trust is going to be built more than if you, you know, deliver, you know, at the end of it, here you go, and it's slightly wrong. It's, you know, that doesn't build the trust.
Actually, also saying what we don't have speaks volumes, because then we can understand where the gaps are. And, you know, your audience, whether it's your internal customer or whoever's in this journey, will have, you know, perspectives that we just don't see. Everyone comes at it from a different angle, which is very powerful and very useful in this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also, you know, the creativity element. I think if you involve lots of people and they have to they have to understand that they have to feel, should I say, not understand, but they have to feel that they can have their say. I mean, I think we all know, if we reflect on our own experiences, that, you know, where you've been most engaged with a project or a period of time, you know, you've thought outside, not just maybe the time that you're spending on it, you know, at work. It's that you kind of think about it outside and you reflect and think, oh, actually, that's a really good idea. I'll write it down, or I'll make a note, whatever you do, you know, and apply that. You don't get that thinking or that time spent by other people in terms of their headspace, if they're not engaged and involved in the project to that degree, if they don't have that buy-in. I don't feel anyway. Yeah. So yeah, there's always the measurable ones around, you know, faster time to market. You know, my mind's gone blank over examples, but I'm thinking about all the customers. Well, actually, I've got one customer actually who, you know, I mean, they have an amazing kind of ethos within their work, and they moved their entire business in the earliest stages of lockdown from, you know, live events to online, you know, to online events. In a matter of weeks. I mean, you know, it was quite astounding, their turnaround in terms of actually what they, you know, did with the business. And that was just because it was literally everyone hands on deck. And, you know, I think that was, you know, a very good example of everybody not just looking at their job description and what do I do, but actually feeding in, I've seen this, applying different technologies, you know, so on and so forth. So, yeah.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because some of the conversations I've been having with our clients is very much around, you know, being agile, being flexible. What stops being as effective are these kind of rigid job descriptions and to-do lists. And actually, we become an output-focused environment. And actually, I think that as a movement in itself, you know, lends itself to great collaboration, great empowerment. You know, the people will lead for the people, by the people. They will take your organization and run with the visions that you create together. So it's very powerful. But how can an organization trying to reawaken, realign? I mean, everyone, I feel it's a bit, we're not in hibernation, far from it. So many people who talk, you know, we talk about being busier than ever. But not everyone isn't necessarily doing exactly the same job as they were doing before, are they? So defining what output looks like when the landscape has changed, there's a lot of variables in that. You know, how would an organization approach something like that?
Well, I think if you look to the reflective point, is that, you know, ideally you've got some sort of purpose, and I don't really buy into the fact that every business has, you know, a sort of evangelical purpose or vision, you know, within it. But I think most businesses have a broadly understood purpose that resonates with the majority of their employees. Otherwise, I think they probably would have gone out of business. So they must have some purpose in terms of like serving, one need or other. So I think involving the team in looking at, okay, well, what's our market, and and what do we see others doing? How do we adapt? What we're trying to achieve with our clients and with our customers in this new world. What suggestions do people have? Or it might be, I think, outlining, actually, this is how I see it. If you are the leader in the organization or part of the leadership team, is recognizing that you won't have all of the answers, but actually, at least if you can inspire through actually how we can still continue to make our customers feel, make our clients feel, benefit our clients. If there's no benefit whatsoever, that's challenging. You might have to pivot completely. But I think, for most businesses, the service element will still be there. And I think to involve the team in, okay, what could the plan look like? And that might have a knock-on impact in terms of, your job. But again, I think, to the practicalities point, most people would be quite comfortable changing. I mean, I've already seen it in organizations where their role has already changed. It's flattened. A traditional kind of hierarchy is not dissimilar to a waterfall project methodology in terms of it all comes from the top, and you expect your leader to have all of the answers. A flattened structure doesn't mean no structure. It means that actually, and this plays to the coaching part, which is that actually, if you know what your end goal is in terms of servicing or delighting your customers, and within each role, what are your options then around this? So, the coaching methodology that I mostly use mentally is the grow. What's your goal? What's your reality? Where are we? Well, we've still got these customers relationships. The majority of most businesses are to find, keep and grow customers, just in the same way that HR, it's find, keep and grow people. So, how do we look at actually, splitting that up? So maybe it might be that we look at different ways of, finding, customers now. Likewise, certain teams, and it will maybe be different teams who are focused on actually growing their customers, or reaching or engaging with their customers more. Not necessarily, recognizing that there are going to be limitations. Money isn't being spent in the same way, but how do you keep that relationship going? And I think if you create teams, and that's their main responsibility, that is, you allow them to find some of the ways to do it. You don't just tell them. And I think that eases pressure on a lot of leaders as well, is that they don't need to have all of the answers, because actually we can find those within ourselves, or we can try them. Again, the idea of an agile organization is this continuous improvement. So you might not get it right first time. You might try one thing and it just falls flat. Find stuff up.
What doesn't. I think the less pressure we put on ourselves, the more creativity, the more engagement, the more just energy and drive that people will put towards things where they don't feel judged. And I think that in itself is a real shift, isn't it, for organizations? I've heard some great stories of HR people in the HR team and HRD saying, all the managers, all the directors have been so engaging with their people. They've gone from being client facing, which is usually the majority of what they do, turning it back inward and sharing that, that engagement with their people, and it's just lifted them. So if they can keep some of that to bring them along on this journey, then that is going to pay off. In terms of this coaching model, how would you talk in practical terms about getting everyone? I mean, I suppose we'd have to define it, wouldn't we, first, what good looks like through this process. And then the managers talk to their individuals, just doing it a bit more on a sort of ground level basis.
Yeah, I think one of the things I had on here was just something about what Agile isn't, and what it isn't is just an absolute free for all. So I think some people view Agile as this sort of jelly-like mess, and that's not the way. It doesn't mean there's no structure and no process. It just means a slightly more flattened structure. In fact, actually, a lot of people think that with the right processes that involve continuous improvement, you're more likely to feel stable, which is good for some people who still find change challenging. But this focusing on learning, focusing on the continuous improvement, networks. So whether they're self-organized teams, so it might be looking at your organization structure and and actually ripping it up and just saying, okay, well, if we're devolving responsibilities, what does this look like? And that might mean change in terms of, what have I got it? Oh yeah, it's on the next slide actually. But I'm thinking in terms of that is, on a practical basis, that is change to some people's jobs, and in some cases significant change. Now that might mean, at its most extreme, a restructure where you're doing full-on consultation with people about their teams. I mean, I do know of businesses who've actually realized that with the remote working that they have, by the way, no intention of changing in the next few months. They can rely on smaller teams, and they see this in smaller, more nuclear, agile teams that actually, can expand. So it's all about skill set, understanding what skill set you have within the organization before then actually, looking at understand the optimum, kind of structure in terms of what you need to deliver and what you need to support, understanding the skill set that you need to support that, and then either skilling up or moving people into those roles. So, all of those, involve consultation to a degree. I mean, I'm not necessarily formal consultation, although that might be, in some senses, but they, just in terms of the dialogue around that, I think.
Yeah. So where there's a redundancy process and people can say, I think I might be right for this job or that job, then there would be the practical consultation. But an organization, through this agile thinking, will already have some ideas of what these new roles look like, and write down, you've written job description, and that's what I was just about to say. So I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, no, but it's an obvious thing, is that, I mean, I used to, I think in the old days, not even the good old days, people used to sign their job descriptions. I always used to find that really bizarre, because for a start, any job description that I've ever worked with has always had a bit of fluidity. But your job description will be changed in terms of actually what's expected, and back to your point about outcomes. So this isn't just about, okay, I'm going to perform X, Y, and Z task. It's about actually the purpose of this role, and what skills are expected, within it. And fluid team structures. If you're going to be agile, you're going to create and then disband teams, you need to know what skills you've got in the organization. So some sort of skills audit is always quite useful, and and actually you can do that relatively easily with sort of an Excel spreadsheet and what have you. So it doesn't need to be this massive convoluted thing, but even if it's just some people within the know. I mean, most of our clients are kind of work up to 100 people, and I think the majority of those you could sit together and you could work out what skills people have. But so I think that fluidity, I think I put it under practicalities, because I do think it is still something that you can practice. It's a growth mindset. So adapting growth mindset is really critical in terms of your leadership and organizational capabilities. So I think if you would struggle with agile if you were very much on the fixed mindset. So I can't remember whether I've talked about this in the last session before, but so I'm a big proponent of growth mindset. I'm a big proponent of Carol Dweck, who is the sort of mother of the movement. But a growth mindset, for those who don't know what it is essentially where you believe that a person's talents can be developed in any number of ways. So it could be by interventions, it could be by different strategies, it could be by being helped by other people. As opposed to a fixed mindset, which is where you believe, thanks Baxter, my dog, which is where you believe that basically talent is innate and fixed. So I've worked within both types of organisation. I've kind of seen the downsides of the fixed, but you have to have this growth mindset, I believe, because you've got to believe in the continuous improvement. And if you're of a fixed mindset, you're going to struggle with any type of failure. So if you believe that your business is maybe not as open to having a growth mindset, let me point you in the direction of Carol Dweck's materials, and you have a look at those and have a read in terms of the benefits. But I do think that's something that can be learned as well.
Yeah. And it's a choice, isn't it? I mean, we all think there's only one way until we hear of another way. And then it's like, well, let's look into this. Let me get under the skin of it. And especially for now, as you've said, this growth mindset and this ability to understand that the goals will shift continually as well. Right. You may be 5 or 10% either way, and there or thereabouts, but it's not going to be a definitive anymore, especially for the next 6 months to a year till we get this vaccine, because external forces are continually ebbing and flowing. So we've got to be comfortable in this agility and growth mindset. I'm very much a big believer in it. It just removes the barriers to success, I think, and again, it empowers your people to understand that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to have ideas that that aren't taken up. It's about everyone collectively moving in the same direction, rowing in the same direction, so people aren't wasting energy going against each other. So it's more of a vision and an ideal and a goal, as opposed to a strict decision that's been made. And it will really serve itself well, and actually in itself that will reawaken employees who might not even be used to it and think, wow, this is exciting for us.
I think for some people this has been an absolute wake-up call, and I've spoken to employees who've been absolutely delighted by actually their new working arrangements, and they've had more FaceTime of this variety and more discussion with some of their leadership teams than ever before, which has got to be a positive out of all of this.
It builds trust and confidence, doesn't it? And all of a sudden everyone's been trusted to work at remotely and flexibly, and all of a sudden they're giving more than ever. And I don't think anyone expected, we some of the stats we look at, productivity, 65% of organizations have said it stayed the same. 10% have said productivity has increased with this flexible approach. So,
I can well understand that. I mean, I think, if you've got the right ethos, you can make the practical changes, and communicate that, and people are on board. I think that's great. I think there needs to be a commitment to carry it through, because I think some of the worst kind of changes can be if you say, okay, this is what we'd like to adopt. I trust people. I mean, that's what you're saying is I trust you more to come on board, and then to suddenly hoik that back and say, actually, no, I think that sort of stop-start doesn't necessarily help. And I think back to your point about outcomes, a practical implication of this is around rewards. So you can have more short-term iterative rewards. So I know some great rewards programs that have worked on a project basis, rather than this traditional kind of at a different level, mixture of company and individual, which is a whole other topic. That I could wax lyrical about, but so rewards based on outcomes, and they can be more relevant to people as well.
And also creating unity and team connection when everyone is so remotely based. These sort of project-based rewards outcomes can really solidify that goal, and again just alignment. I think that's really a really good point, actually. And, it all has to be linked in the bigger picture, but you get the knowledge and you get the input from your people. So I think that's so powerful, Claire. Thank you.
Not at all. I think that is the end of my little ditty. I think I've probably talked enough. Are there any questions that have come through on the chat?
I'm looking at the chat box, and we've definitely got a very intent listening audience today, which hopefully means that we are giving them everything they want to hear and more. What I would say is that both Claire and I are available to talk outside of this webinar as well. What we do is really help our business community and our clients get from where they are now, and maybe thinking about, this is where we want to be, this is where we are now. We actually know what that looks like, and Claire, you've brought that to life beautifully today about what the successful agile working world can look like. But if you want to talk more about the steps that go to achieving that, then let us know. The skill set, the skills audit and things like that, we're doing that a lot for our clients at the moment, because redundancy is on the lips of organizations, and we've actually got a question come up. I'm just going to say redundancy is on so many organizations' lips, but sometimes this bumping, this thing to say, well, look, you're not right for this role, but there is another role that you might be better for, and the person in that role might be better for something else. So think broadly. Don't narrow your thinking too much. I would say is really useful. So what's Margaret saying? Margaret asks, how do you plan future resources in an agile environment?
I guess it depends how much in the future that you're looking at, that I would see from my perspective. You won't know everything on the horizon, but there are going to be trends. So you would look to think, okay, so again, using your team to think, what is a possibility that we might be able to, deliver in terms of service to our customers? What kind of things are we thinking about in the next year? What kind of skills are we going to need? Because you may not have them now, but it might be a case of developing them over that time. So in the same way that I guess you would look to see what are we doing with, we've got this common purpose right now that we're all focused on. We've got these teams that are doing X, Y, and Z. In the future, this might look different with some of the skills, be it online, if you're a sort of retail environment, or how that will be very different to some of the companies that I work with in terms of the online gaming sector, for example. It'd be incredibly different, but the skills to think about, that would be where I would start to plan my future resources. What type of skills would be needed in the future? And you don't just need to look in your own teams as well. There's lots of research out there over kind of future thinking, what that might implications of kind of a future workforce. There's a lot of research out there as well that you can have a look at.
And I would also add to that again, if you think about sort of strategy sort of days and things like that, often organizations are looking at 1 year, 3 year, 5 years. I think it's still okay to have that 5-year plan. I imagine that all our little bumps along the road will come through, but actually the next year you need a plan in its entirety for this 12 months, because of the changing face of the economy and what's expected out there. But also, you may actually find another revenue stream in this time that becomes part of your 5-year plan. And they say something, necessity is the master of all invention. So dare to dream. Look at and ask your customers. I think we've spoken about our customers, but as much as you engage with your internal customers, ask your customers how you can help them. There are going to be ways that you can take your knowledge and skill set and redefine that for the current time. So it is definitely sort of the 12-month plan, I would say, and the 3-year, 5-year as well, which may look different, but you may get another revenue stream. So I think it's important to look short term in more detail.
And the other thing, very, very quickly, because I know I'm really conscious of time, but very, very quickly, is the what if plan, which is the what some of our customers have had, which is that if they have the 30, 60, 90 day plan, and that's all great, but then they have, okay, what happens if what happens if we fall off a cliff, or what happens if this area flies? So there's always got to be a plan B.
Yeah, very much. We've got one more question here from Shobha. Shobha is asking, how can HR teams help employees to embrace agility?
Well, I think this comes back to engagement and clear communication. Is that this isn't just about leadership being whoever the CEO or the MD is, because again, if we think about agility, it's about the ownership and actually everybody adopting this kind of mindset. So if you think about continuous improvement, you can embrace you can help people embrace agility by encouraging them to ask for feedback, and encouraging them to adopt a growth mindset, to encouraging them to talk about what if, and and how could things change. So it is getting out there and speaking to them, I think, more than ever. I mean, there's lots of other ways you can do it, but I think to me it's actually talking to people, and communicating that kind of message, that it's okay to keep asking, that they shouldn't just wait.
It's almost setting up workshops that you take them out of their day-to-day work. You create teams. You can do this on Zoom, and you can create separate rooms in Zoom, and you can almost give them questions to think about and ponder and start to write down their thoughts. So without saying, hey, we're going to do a day on how you can become more agile, you can actually create a process that will help them think agilely, and at the end of it say, wow, this is so powerful, we're going to adopt some of what you're doing into this. And then you can tell them that, hey, we're working to, this is making us more agile, and we want to stay on this path with you. So, you don't have to tell them the outcome. You can actually just take them through a series of exercises that can help them to see the power in agile thinking, and give them the room to think. So lovely. Well, look, Shobha, if you have more questions, please reach out. We actually run something, Claire, I'm sure you do with your clients as well, but we run kickoff strategy days with not just organizations, but teams. So they define what good looks like for them. They look at the, the strengths and weaknesses and challenges that are going to get them there. And we look at the skills within the team that can help them, that can then help them achieve the outcome that they need. So there are good structures that can help teams go from fixed mindset to agile mindset, and hopefully that will enhance and really reawaken and align your workforce going forward.
Great stuff.
Wonderful. Well, Claire, thank you so much as ever.
Thank you everyone for tuning in.
Very much so. Thanks everyone for joining, and Claire, hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.